Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Mandy, Indiana album. We have here the second album from the English electronic band who have caught my attention recently, especially with their debut album, I've Seen a Way. I was very taken in by that album, especially just with the sound that they established being a very kind of experimental and industrial style. And because of that, I found it to be a very unique and intriguing album, and I definitely wanted to hear what they had in store for us with this one too. And what they seem to have done on this album is gone even further, having an even more kind of noisy and harsher industrial sound, with this project in general also just having a lot more intensity to it and a hell of a lot more experimentation as well. I think that in general, just the expansion of their sound on this album is absolutely fascinating, as they obviously do very much stick to their kind of electro-industrial roots, but there is still a really diverse selection of genres and styles that make brief appearances on this album. Like, for example, on the opening track, you have quite a lot of influence from harsh noise, which I think they managed to use so well, with this track having a very manic and abrasive style, which mixed in with their kind of industrial sound I think works incredibly well. And you also have some pretty cool glitchy style sound effects, which I think sound really good, and all of that while the still very mechanical and industrial style absolutely prevails, ultimately making this opening track a really strong start. And even though it does set the bar pretty high for the rest of the album, I think that most of it does manage to live up to that, as nearly every song does have some interesting or unique feature or style that works really well, and always managing to be blended in almost seamlessly with their typical kind of sound. Magazine is also a really cool song with a very ominous progression in the beginning, which again is not a style you would typically expect to work on an album as harsh and manic as this, but having the odd track in there like this one that's a lot more focused on atmosphere actually works out really well, and gives the album some diversity that it does manage to absolutely thrive on. Really like how there are lots of very weird and experimental sounds that are used on this track to build a lot of tension, and also the very intense vocals that actually have quite a melodic style to them, which works out really well. And the outro of this song as well is absolutely fantastic, with this huge aspect of brutality, as you have this very kind of harsh, droning noise that manages to give the outro a really unsettling atmosphere. I really like the way the song Try Saying opens with this very manic style of percussion. And to be honest, I do wish it were a bit more of a feature on the song, as it's teased in the beginning, but nothing else ever really comes of it. But there are still a lot of other really interesting things going on the song outside of that. There is still that very harsh and noisy style, but this time with a much more organic approach, as a lot of the noises that are used on this track just sound a lot more mechanical than usual, as opposed to the more electronic style that they usually take on. I think that Dodecahedron does take maybe just a little bit too long to get going, which on an album as short and intense as this one does hold it back a little bit, but once it does get started, this song is absolutely amazing at what it does. Again, with a lot of very random and interesting noises, many of which are very hard to identify exactly what's being used to make certain sounds, but all of it put together not only is incredibly interesting, but actually surprisingly melodic despite how harsh it is as well. I absolutely love the super moody and ominous atmosphere on A Brighter Tomorrow, with this song actually taking on a very minimalist approach as well, but there is still that constant droning on this track that does keep it feeling very intense. And I also really like the sort of distant sounding vocals while the more metallic sounds dominate. I love how intense things get on Life Hex, with this being one of the absolute loudest songs on the album and is just in your face constantly. But they do manage to pull off an interesting combination on this track, with this one also being very mysterious at the same time, especially in a lot of the in-between moments with the more intense vocal style with the much more quiet droning metallic sounds. And then just as the song starts getting even more insane, it just out of nowhere seems to take a much more calm direction. And I think it's kind of a shame, because it does sort of ruin the momentum that the song had, and even though it does go back to its much more harsh and manic style towards the end, I think that that return is just a little bit too late, with the very kind of random and out of place chill moment halfway through the song just kind of ruining it a little bit. I really like the more electronic style that Isthadzo takes, with the very fuzzy bass and deep percussion working so well together. And when the song really starts to pick up the pace about halfway through, I think that this moment pays off so much, with the peak of the climax taking on this almost techno kind of sound, which is absolutely amazing. And again, still with the very mechanical and industrial noise, I think works surprisingly well. I really like the much more sparse kind of style that Sicko takes on in some moments, which actually works better than you would expect despite how bleak and not hugely melodic it is. And it only gets better as the song progresses. Towards the end, you have a lot of more electronic arrangements being used, and they give the song a real sense of coolness. I really love the very cool and funky beat that starts off Cursive, and I also really like the sense of mystery that comes along with the whispering vocals. And I also think it's really cool to just hear this song go through its various different phases, especially when it starts leaning into a more dance kind of sound that just keeps on building and building, and I think it does an absolutely amazing job at really getting you hyped. And I absolutely love as well the closing track, I'll Ask Her, for its very raw and bleak style, particularly in the very harsh vocals, with the song in general being much more vocal focused. And I think that the very sparse instrumentation helps reinforce that incredibly well, and the singing on this track is absolutely insane, definitely giving some of the most passionate vocal performances of the whole album. I think it's really cool to see this band absolutely doubling down on the sound they established on their debut, with this one taking everything that was good about that and making it even better, as I find that this album is just an even more insane experience with how harsh and noisy and experimental it is, but still seemingly never being afraid to show off all sorts of weird styles that work so much better than you would ever have expected them to. And so that is why I'll be giving this album an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.